Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast with your host, Kareen Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Kareen.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast. And today I have the most amazing joy igniter, Marcus Weiss, and he is going to tell you all about himself.
Oh my goodness, Kareen, that is a fantastic introduction. And I love that challenge as we, I think, might encounter a question of, or that statement, tell us all about yourself. What would any one of us do when that spotlight is put on us? What comes up for us in that moment? Do we shrink from it and go like, oh my goodness, I can't believe people are seeing me and are hearing me or feeling me right now? Or like an actor, which by the way, I come from a background of acting, directing, and producing, you go, yes, I'm in the light. Look at who I am, or feel me now, or witness what I have to share. And if that is an impulse that feels good in you, then I believe you're on the right path. So that being said, my name is Marcus Weiss, and I believe to my core that feelings of joy are the match that lights the fuel of our lives. Joy is not the activity, it's not the thing to do, but I believe it is the match that lights the fuel, because we all have this thing inside of us that goes like, oh, this is what I want, this is what I know I need to do, or I want to do so much, and these are my aspirations and my dreams. And yet what keeps us from it? And I believe it's the ability to look forward to doing the things that get us where we want to go. Like literally, that get us off the couch, that get us to the gym, that get us, doing the podcast, which Kareen, I'm so happy for you that you're doing. So, in short, I am a joy catalyst, igniter, generator, curator. What are some other words? Confabulator. It doesn't.
Magnifier. You're definitely
Defier. Yeah.
magnifier.
So whatever, magnifier. And I do that for myself so that I can show up in that way, so that that can happen in other people. So that others can get through the challenges and over the obstacles that stand in between where they are and where they want to go. And yeah.
I love it. And what I think, audience, you hear why I wanted Marcus to be here. He is contagious, and his joy is contagious. And that is really what he goes out to do, is to be that igniter, to set that spark, to help other people see that despite, in spite, however you want to say it, your circumstances, air quote, your circumstances in life, joy is always the possibility if you choose it.
The possibility, if you choose it.
Yes.
And those are two really important words, because the word impossibility, Kareen, implies it's not here yet.
Impossible, right?
Right? It's not here yet. And it's possible, which hopefully triggers a thought and a feeling of hope. And in that is perhaps a hope that it's possible, right? So it's this blurry thing. And then you said, if you choose it, and the choosing, oftentimes people, I believe, underestimate how difficult that can be for some people.
Hmm.
And if you're all the way in a hole, which some of our listeners might be,
Oh yeah.
then choosing to even lift your chin just a little bit to see that tiny circle of light that's at the top of the well is almost seems almost insurmountable. And to those who are already at a certain level, it might, seem impossible to get to yet another level. So all of us, no matter where we are in life, could benefit from lifting our chin up just a little more to see where that next level is for us, that next ray of sunshine, like a plant,
Yeah,
like a plant always trying to find the sun.
I
But
agree.
how difficult, right? So how to choose
Mm,
those things, how to choose to do the activity, how to choose to get up, how to choose to move on. To me, that's where the crux is. And it starts with finding something to feel joyous about. And joy, for me, yes, happens to be jumping up and down like a monkey. Okay. That's like, okay, that's my state. Okay, here we go.
yeah,
Or or maybe something else. And to some people, joy is, it includes awe, it includes wonder, it includes anything, right? On that side of the feeling spectrum that just feels more up than down.
absolutely. And
That's all joy.
yeah, I err on the side of awe and wonder. So for me,
Yeah.
I'll go outside and just spend some time in nature and look around. And I live in a very beautiful area in Wisconsin, and there's so many things for me to see awe and wonder about. And we just had came through the season of fall, and here there's just nothing short of spectacular fireworks that go on. And so my husband and I went away for our anniversary in October, and we're driving along down the road, and I'm just like, the colors are just so, my heart is just bursting, and I just can't, I can hardly take it in. And all I keep saying is, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. And then after a while, I said, okay, baby, I'll just smile. I'll just smile.
Oh,
I'm sure I'm getting pretty annoying.
because he's like, oh, you're distracting me. I can't focus on the road. You're too loud.
And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And how many times can somebody say that? But it, you know, that for me, that hasn't always been the case, to be able to look around. And so when you speak to that, I can remember the points in my life where things were very dark, and lifting my chin up a little higher seemed more than I could imagine. But that had more to do with the thought processes that I was allowing to creep in, and living more in a state of fear or fear-based emotion, instead of living in the state of love, and knowing that m- no matter what, I am love, and I am loved by a source greater than myself. And that took me a bit to get to that place. Um, have you ever been in like that kind of a space where maybe the joy wasn't quite oozing out of you the way it does now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Last night,
Last week.
this
Okay.
this morning,
Yeah.
and I say that um, because it's not that those states don't happen to me.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not like those feelings don't come up, or I'm
Hmm.
not in a situation where I am reacting rather than responding.
Yeah.
What is so great and, dare I say, so joyous is that I recognize that I am reacting. I recognize that I could respond. The
Mm.
difference being I'm filtering it and making a choice internally to then express something differently in order to get different results in the moment and therefore in my life. And so I spend less time in those, what we might like to call unresourceful states, or states that don't feel good, or states that could lead to frustration, anger, resentment, depression, all those things, because I know where I've been and I know where it could go. But I don't only know it now, I feel where it could go, and I feel capable of going in the opposite direction. And so I spend less time there. So call it what you will. I bounce back. or and sometimes it takes, 90 seconds, sometimes it takes an hour. And if it takes any longer than that, then I am choosing to, and this is what, again, where the choice comes in. This is the meaning I put to it. I am choosing to honor certain feelings
Okay.
that are just part of the human experience that I might feel like I need to go through. But I know that I have the tools to get out of it on the other side. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah. And if we don't know, if we don't have a certain perspective, or let's say the tools to respond and recover and get back into a place of awe, joy, wonder, gratitude, we might end up suffering,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
And I mean, that's what sort of suffering is, I believe, is when we spend time in an unresourceful state, or a state that doesn't feel good or is not life affirming to us, and we do not have the tools to choose to get out of it, and we experience that as suffering.
Absolutely. Yeah. And boy, suffering is so interesting. So real time, today is December 5th.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the 3-year anniversary, if you will, of my mother's death. And
Mm.
um, my mom, in her ending portion of her cancer, so we only knew for 2 months that she had pancreatic cancer. And but she just wouldn't take the pain meds. And where I'm like, Mom, come on. I mean, you're in like excruciating pain. She equated it to childbirth pain. And I'm like, well, hell no, I'm not gonna sit here and let you suffer, right? And then finally it like hit me, and I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, like, do you believe that you need to suffer? Do you believe that you deserve to suffer? Because, you know, in 2011, my brother had died. And anyways, long story short, yeah, my mom believed that because she wasn't able to save him, right, and that as his mother, that would be her job. Um, and she believed that she was supposed to suffer, like this was her penance, if you will, to pay
Mm.
because
Okay.
she didn't do like what she was traditionally taught in her religion that she was supposed to do as his mother. And so she believed that this was part of it, right? She was being punished. The cancer was a punishment to her, and she was supposed to suffer, therefore, not to be relieved by pain medication. I was like, hell no. So, every time we went in there, we pressed the pain pump and just let her, painkiller pump. But, anyways, I say that into understanding that that suffering can be that really ingrained belief system that we are somehow inherently bad because we may have made a choice that was, not so stellar, or we did something and we failed, or, we can carry this stuff and like
Mm.
bury it deep inside of us in believing somehow that we're not good, right? And so that suffering can be something that we think we deserve. And
Mm.
yeah. So in that, right? So when you have that understanding that I can make a choice, I can do a little something different. First of all, like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that we are meant to suffer. I believe that we are here to spread our love and spread our light and really be like you are a joy igniter for those around us and to experience life and with all of that being said, you do
Mm.
that. You light up a room. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so I know you can't physically see Marcus because you're listening to this on a podcast, but if you could see him, he radiates joy. And even though like he's very honest and he's saying, this morning he
Yep.
was in an unresourceful state, but he's able to take himself from that unresourceful state. Can you share with us, Marcus, maybe a little bit about like what does that look like?
What does it look like?
Yeah,
Well,
let's
if you saw me, if you watched me go from one to the other, you might see me doing an interruption of a pattern, right? So because suffering is a pattern of thinking and putting a certain meaning to those thoughts,
Mm,
like I'm running late. And the meaning to that might be I'm going to make a bad impression or I'll be fired. So
sure.
so that might be your pattern. Every time you think I'm going to be late, oh, I'm going to be fired. I am late. Oh, I'm going to be so fired. Or you can attach a meaning. I'm late. Oh, I can look at the foliage. I'm so glad I'm running late because, or whatever. I'm so glad I'm stuck in traffic because it gives you more time to look at the leaves. Okay. So, but that's so, and there you go. And now we're laughing, right? So
Yeah,
you'll
right.
see me going from one to the other. And I might do different techniques. Like I might literally like sit up straight and I take a deep breath, put a smile on my face, and then I might make a little fist and say, yes. And then meaning like, oh, I've changed my state. I've changed my body position. I have more oxygen in my brain. And I want to anchor that. I like to call it, I like to say like, that's a thing. That's a
Right.
thing. Yes. And then I might shake my shoulders in celebration if I'm in the car, let's say. Okay. So you might from the outside go like, what the heck is Marcus doing? And you might see that even when I was a kid, Kareen, you would see me doing something similar where I would be walking on the street and whatever, and all of a sudden I'd be like, and I'm a musician, I'm a drummer and stuff. So I sing to myself. And back then I didn't know what I was quote unquote doing.
That's what I was going to ask you. I'm like, it just came naturally for you. I love that.
Yes. Yes. But it was right. But at that time, I didn't have neuro encoding specialists around me
Yeah.
to tell me,
Yeah.
you're interrupting a pattern, you genius. I just thought I was crazy. Or I thought I was like, what are you doing? And I thought I was burying feelings.
Mm,
Even when I got smarter, I'm like, Marcus, stop just singing your troubles away.
mm,
Right. But we've all seen the movie Whistle While You Work, Snow White. I don't know if I'm able to mention brand names, but so, whistle while you work. It sounds crazy. It's like, I'm not going to whistle while I'm doing this horrible work. No, no, no. Here's the deal. You're whistling so that you change your association with the work. You
yeah.
start by whistling, and then it makes you feel different. And here's the key, Kareen, and those who are listening. I, I'd like to say I can't help myself. I don't want to help myself in this moment. So this is the key. When you whistle while you're working and you start to feel better in that moment, that's when you have to make the fist and say yes and make that new association so that you don't go, this is crazy, this is silly. No,
Yeah.
no, no. It's a real thing. And then
Mhm.
so don't discount it. Go like, no, that is how it's done. And because you just did it, you celebrate. And that's kind of like what it looks like. And it doesn't always look ecstatic, Kareem.
Mm,
Sometimes you might have to look a little closer.
yeah.
Sometimes you might see me go, you know, there's a frown, but what it looks like is me not opening my mouth
Mm, okay.
to make it worse.
Sure. Right. Because that in that moment, if you are reactive, we
Right.
can really, like
Oh,
blow things up, if you will, right? That reaction is like throwing a stick of dynamite in there and letting it just
yeah.
implode.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, we've all heard things like you can burn down a whole pile of wood with a single match that took you,
absolutely.
10 years to build.
Sure.
And you
Right.
put one match in there. Um, but you know what? I'm going to say yes, and this moment celebrate because I don't want to go down that
Yeah.
burn down the house
Right. And I
rabbit
think,
hole.
it's important to acknowledge our emotions because we are emotional beings, right? So it's important to say, you know what, this hurts. Like this hurts my heart, hurts my feelings. I'm sad, like in the situation of grief, you can't sweep that under the rug and pretend like there isn't any grief because grief needs to move through. And once the emotion moves through the body to completion, right, we can then move forward into a new emotion of choice. But if I'm pretending that, like I'm going to sit and pretend that I'm not grieving the loss of my mother or my dog or my brother or my dad or whatever, um, I just continue to stuff it inside of my body, then all of that emotion, which is energy, energy in motion, but now it's not in motion. The energy is stuffed into my body, and it's in there and it's stuck. And eventually, because every cell has its own little energy body, right? And there it's a collective. And now that energy is all stuck together, and it can cause a whole host of other issues and create dis-ease in our bodies. So we get to express emotion, allow the emotion to move through us, choose a new emotion because we want to be vibrating at a higher frequency, because that's going to continue then to attract higher frequencies to us, and that higher energy bodies. And the more we acknowledge it, and you're say anchoring it in and saying yes to that new thing, the default system then becomes the new one. So instead of me, right, really going into I can speak of my mom, and I can speak of her without having, a complete meltdown and crying, right? I can think of all the wonderful things that I loved about her. So yesterday I spent that time polishing up the memories and remembering the great, wonderful things, her hand squeeze, her smiles, the funny
Oh,
laughs, the taking her to the bar the one time my sister and I did, because my mom really didn't drink, and the
uh-huh.
lot of fun we had. But
Oh,
those sort of things, right? So being able to do that and to change the story, right? To change the story that I'm telling myself. And I could wallow. I often will say to my husband, right now I feel like I'm wallowing like a little pig in mud, right? Because it can get kind of nice and comfy and squishy in that nice cool mud. And
sure.
then if I'm wallowing around in there too long, now it becomes a part of my wiring in my brain, and it's like, no, stop, right? Stop, and pick that new emotion, and let's do the new thing, and change it and give it a new face. And so the pattern interrupt is a big one. I use the
Yeah,
pattern interrupt quite a bit in my life,
yeah.
and a gift, just a beautiful gift. And I know that you not only are you a performer, but you also
Yes,
work with students.
I do.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
So thank you for sharing all of that and about
Welcome.
sort of undoing blockages of energy flow. Because when we have those blockages, like a rock in a river, it will continue to interrupt the flow coming towards it. Right? So if you create a blockage of something that you don't like in life, then the next time you encounter something similar, it's gonna continue to hit that spot. And until you free that up, you won't have that continuous loving flow that looks at life as a benevolent
Mhm.
experience. So I find that in students. I share that. So thank you for that. And I share that because oftentimes what I find in students, because I've worked with students all the way from preschool, really through seniors, but we're talking about students, perhaps youth. And currently I work primarily with college age kids, students. And
Good.
yes, right, kids. They're so in many ways beyond where I remember being when I was in
Oh yeah.
college. They're speaking of possibilities. They're constantly exposed to possibilities in a way that, and I say exposed to possibilities because in a way that was so different from when I grew up, because I would make up my possibilities for better or for quote unquote worse.
Sure.
This generation now is seeing things online all the time and social media. And just when they think their life might be looking up, they see ways in which the world is looking down or the ways in which they could be even better. And I think they're constantly challenged with a sense that they're okay inside. And I'm reading a book currently, actually the sequel to a book called The Untethered Soul,
Oh, good series.
which is an amazing book. And um, in it, the author says that we all are after feeling okay inside,
Mm,
right? we're all just trying to feel whole again. Like we started in the belly, like, nobody inside the belly felt anything but worthy and whole and loved and present.
Sure.
And I think once we come out, then
We
somehow we're miserable because life is hard or whatever. We start to cry. No. But the point is somewhere, I find that a lot of college age kids have somehow turned inward, or there's blockages that have developed. Something I like to believe, because I've worked with preschoolers, toddlers and like young children are on the whole freer. They feel they're more open. Their voices are open. They walk upright. They bound around. When you walk into a preschool, generally there's nothing but hope. They look up at you like, what else have you got? Because they look at me like they're playing, and they're playing like it's life, and they're playing, and they head towards the next thing like, oh, I'm going to the kitchen, or the play kitchen, or I get to go to the sandbox, whatever. They're looking
their
forward to
imagination is just
their imagination.
and nobody's
Their
told them
imagination.
wrong, right?
Right. They're in awe, and they're in experiencing wonder. And so in their imaginations, they see positive possibilities. And so the students that I encounter sometimes in college have experienced or made up reasons why not to look forward to either the long-term future because of the state of the world, whether not to look forward to a year from now. And it boils all the way down to, because I teach acting classes, all the way down to looking forward to going next, or looking forward to raising your hand.
Sure.
There's a lot of, I find a lot of, either it's fear and insecurity and some kind of blockages, or they don't care in some ways. Not like in a like a, hey, I don't care. Not like that, but just
apathy.
Apathy, or they only care about what they feel is important. They don't see that there might be possibility in somebody else, or just trying this thing they've never even encountered before.
So I hear so much, what I'm hearing is so much of ego. So like, because the ego is very centered around in this form of ego that I'm speaking to anyways, is the ego is very centered around being of this earth, right? In the earthly material things that, we're going to get while we're here. And what can I possibly achieve while I'm here? And so when we're in that state of ego, we're not really living at a soul level. And with that being said, the soul's job here, we came here to be light and love, period. That's what we're here to be, to spread it, to be it. So love, when we come from a space of love all the time, which isn't always possible because we're human and we're here in Earth School and we're having a human experience, um, we're going to be in the ego a little bit, but they're seeing so much more ego than we ever did because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, the cell phone to be in constant comparison. And so they're living, and rather than living with the earth and in conjunction and in a oneness, they're living in separation and believing that they're somehow, that they're a standalone. And we're not standalones. We are all connected. We're all part of the ocean, if you will. There isn't just one wave in the ocean. There's no separate wave in the ocean. We're all part of the ocean, right? And so I think when you are working with students like that, they believe somehow there's a separateness, right? Because social media, whatever is painting a lot of fear out there in creating that and saying, we're separate, we're different, you're different, you're doing this and he's doing that and she's doing this and that's wrong and this is right. And who's to say what's wrong or right, because it's all in a continuum anyways. And but that's a whole deep conversation.
It is. Let's go there. Let's go. Which is, by the way, why with the students I start, and I just ended the semester today, actually. I start the semester with, you're whole and you're loved and you're 100% no matter what. And I say that before you've done a single thing. And often don't believe me, but I
Yeah.
need to say it. I need to
Yeah.
share it. And then we do experiences. Then we do things, especially in theater class, Kareen,
I love it.
because you can do things that are sort of ensemble-y,
Mhm.
whatever. And then we celebrate. And then I
Yeah.
sort of anchor that and I tell them along the way that that's real. This is real. That's you doing that. And we do this whole thing about like, I did that. I'm, excuse the language, freaking amazing, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And we do these things together, just like you shared. And then today at the end of the semester, I say, I began actually the last class by saying, remember what I said in the beginning? You haven't done your final scenes yet. And I'm telling you, I love you unconditionally. And you're amazing no matter what is to come, so that they go into the scenes knowing that they're like a baby. They're loved
Yeah.
unconditionally and they're free, and hopefully they can play if coming from that state.
Love
First,
it.
that it's not conditional upon their performance. And
Mm.
yet, and here's the thing about students, because you mentioned students, there's a rubric. And that's where the crux is. Of
Yeah.
course, we're in an academic environment, and they know this coming in, and they know
Good.
this going out, is that they'll be graded.
Yeah.
And that's where the challenge of sometimes life comes in, Kareen, right? Because
Mhm.
life has a rubric too. Certain actions lead to certain consequences.
Absolutely.
And so it matters, but it
Mhm.
doesn't matter.
Not in the grand scheme of all the
That's
big
it.
things, right?
Right.
And
That, I mean, yes,
if you
yes.
look at it, right, and you think about, okay, so, oh boy, in the academic environment, right, failure is like the worst case scenario, and somehow, that condition of failure, right, can be so like it's the end of the world. And in the biggest picture of it, you aren't truly living. You haven't truly put a good day in if you didn't fail at least once today, right? Because you're not trying something new, because you're not going to be really good at everything you try. It's part of the whole big picture of it. And unconditional love. And I have been on a quest. I mean, this has been for a number of years, a big quest for me is unconditional love. Am I giving unconditional love? Or do I look from a place of judgment? Am I standing in? And then, first and foremost, do I give that unconditional love to myself? Because we are all whole. We came here whole. We all came here with a vision. We came here to learn and to experience life. And part of experiencing life is loss, is failure, right? What do you learn from, right? They say knowledge is power, but what I've learned along the way is it's not the knowledge that's power. It's have you evaluated it and then embodied the knowledge that you've learned along the way.
Mm. Have you embodied it? Yes. And have you acknowledged and become aware that you have embodied it? And
Yeah,
if so, did you embrace yourself, even celebrated yourself for having done so, so
yeah,
that you will want to do more of it, so that
right.
eventually it will become you? Because that's what it is. Do you give unconditional love to yourself?
Yeah.
Notice, I like to say, and this is not going to sound very professor of me, set the bar low. Set the bar low. Okay? The journey to, of a 10,000 steps happens with one. How big of a step do you need
Totally.
to take to acknowledge that you're moving? So if you've done it in a small moment, then say like, put a smile on your
Yep.
face, whatever it is, or just acknowledge, like, oh, I just was not hard on myself, or whatever, or like, I I just loved myself. I just felt good about myself. Or, if you failed at something and for just a second, you can acknowledge, even if you don't take away a lesson, Kareen, set the bar low. Just go, I just failed and I'm not yelling or screaming into a pillow or crying on the floor.
Yeah.
Even
Or thinking
that,
it's the end of the world, right? I
right?
mean,
Even if you don't think it's the end of the world, just that alone.
yeah.
Like, let the lesson come next. Just go like, I can't believe I'm not crying right now. and then go, yes, yes. And that, to me, that's joy.
Absolutely.
That is your beginning of the journey towards unconditional love, because at least you had one condition under which you loved yourself.
Hmm.
And then you do it under another circumstance. You're like, what? Two different circumstances where I loved myself for a second? Does that mean it's, and here we go to the beginning of the podcast. Is it possible to
Possible.
do that no matter what?
Yeah.
Is it possible to feel joyous and wonder and in awe about any experience? And that's really called enlightenment. And now we're talking, like you said, it's a bigger, that's where we detach our consciousness from our experiences, both good and bad. And that's, I believe, that's when we're open and in flow and experience this sense of love, and therefore radiate love um, outward onto others
Absolutely. And
unconditionally.
having an awareness, right? When we open up our awareness, and we could talk about like perception, the way I perceive the world going to be different than the way you perceive the world and the way my husband does, my kids, but if I can essentially slip on your version of the world, and you tell me what that is, and I slip it on like a coat, and I walk around in a little while, and maybe I might be able to see it through your lens of the world. And I'm like, well, maybe I can see Marcus's way of seeing the world. And but sometimes maybe I slip it on and it's just really not for me. It's like that coat, you put it on in the store, it's not really like for me. So I take it off and I put it back. But that seeing that perspective, being able to gain from all the different people that you come in contact with. If I believe my way is the only way, and I believe that I'm always right, what a narrow, narrow view of the world. But the
Mm,
more I go out and experience world, the more I see other people's perceptions, perspectives, the more that expands my own awareness. And it does move me towards the enlightenment piece, because now, like, in A Course in Miracles, um, a miracle simply is a shift in perspective. So if I
yeah.
can shift the way I see something, I have created a miracle. And not just in myself, but if I can help others to do that. And that's why we're here on this podcast. You out there are out there shifting perspectives for people regularly. You bring your joy into the room, and you bring your light into the room, and people are curious about, how does a guy get to be that joyous?
Mhm.
Where does that come from? You know,
Frankly, it comes from a place of having been on the other side, really,
right? Lived
or
experience,
and
right?
lived experience,
Absolutely.
and I know what it is to not be
Hmm.
that, or to not feel that. And as a kid, I would think I was doing it intuitively. I'm a child of a pretty, um, I was going to say traumatic, but impactful divorce. And I either that was pretty, and then certain parts of my growing up, I think I was already intuitively responding to what was going on around me, and so, and then I became very depressed in college to the point where I almost well, I would say that I almost killed myself, just by not eating and
Okay.
being very uncareful with how I was treating my body and acting, and that's another podcast perhaps, and then finally lifting my chin up while I was jogging in the 80s, and seeing just a little bit of sun peeking out from a cloud. I remember that's sort of a moment of turnaround, after which I became a theater major, because I started to look forward to light coming out from behind the clouds. It was a shift in perspective, as you say, and I believe it was a God-given miracle, but however you see it, it was some kind of shift of perspective, and that led me into the theater, during which I found the ability to take a script and have my imagination affect how I was feeling on stage and how I was acting on stage, and therefore getting applause from an audience. And it wasn't really until I realized that I wasn't applying those same principles in my life, of how I think is how I feel, and how I feel is what I do, and how I do is what I get in my life. And uh, it wasn't until I realized that I was in my personal life kind of going downhill, and I became depressed again many decades later, and didn't realize that I hadn't dealt with some of those blockages. I hadn't dealt with freeing myself in my own life. I had only
Mhm.
been doing it very successfully, mind you, on stage.
Sure.
And so I finally found, online, actually, I found like speakers, and just like you and I, coaches online, that helped me recognize that I could do those same things, that I could actually embrace the activities uh, to get myself into a better state. For me, that state that I found that was most valuable to me was joy. And I found that that's what I ended up bringing to the table. And that's what people like you say. When I walk in, like, I love your energy. I like your joy. It's infectious. I'm like, what do you mean? I can infect people with the ability to better their lives. I can do that on purpose, and I could show up, and that would in turn lights me up. And so that I
Yeah.
can in turn, it's like an engine, right? That's why I say it's an ignition. That's why I say I'm a joy igniter. Did I go off on a tangent, or did I tell my story? It's kind of a
You told
story.
your story. It's all good. It's all good. Because really what it does is it brings us back around to,
Yeah.
um, what wisdom have you gained in this whole journey, in this whole process? Because,
Mhm.
you talked about, you know, the fact that you are joy, you've known from a very early age, kind of how to turn it around. When you are in your low points, you allow yourself to feel the emotion, and then you bring yourself out and you break the pattern. You interrupt a pattern and you insert something good, right? To bring it to back to that resourceful state. Um, but you're not stuffing, right? You're no longer stuffing those emotions. You're allowing them to move and flow through you. And then, just you're sharing with, what happened with you in the college years and in your personal life, and in knowing that, right? So if I stay down in that unresourceful state way too long, that's gonna, like, that can get solid, that can get solidified energy wise, and then become a part of you. And so moving ourselves back into the resourceful state, which is the joy state. So here you are, you're this joyful guy, and you've gained all this wisdom along the way. I would love for you to share with the audience just one nugget that they can put in their pocket and carry with them for a rainy day.
Life is a benevolent force.
Mm.
Life is light that illuminates the possibilities. And among those possibilities is the possibility that we can all be and remain optimistic.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean see options. Options to move toward that light, which is life. We're all moving forward in space and time.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And like a plant, again, always turning towards the light, no matter how quickly or how slowly. In the plant's life, very slowly.
Mm.
There's always light out there, and there's
Mhm.
always a way to face it, no matter how small the sliver is. And the nugget is that we're all we got,
Mm.
meaning you get to do it. It's you,
Mhm.
you know, you're your own vessel. So I like to begin with the stressing of life is light. So even when your eyes are closed, please believe that were you to open them, there would be light. And I mean
Mhm.
that figuratively
Sure.
for those of us, for those listeners who might not, you know, who might be taking it literally. It's just that when you're ready to open your eyes, your ears, or your heart, light will flow in. And if it flows in, that means it can also flow back out.
Mhm.
And I know I like to speak in metaphors, uh, but another nugget is, hey, you've already survived your hardest days, man. You have already survived your hardest days. All of us have our hardest days behind us. And there might be other ones that are coming our way because life is there's always a problem. We just solved one, we're in one, or we're headed towards another one. Yeah, that's life, man.
Yeah, it
And
really is.
and there's people like you, Kareen, and I out there to help you. Was that 10
Absolutely.
nuggets instead of one?
Yeah. But and right, they're just you're never alone. That's what this whole podcast is too, right? I want you people to know you're never alone. It can feel like it. It can feel as if you are separate, but you're not. Just reach out. Reach out. And get the help that you need, right? Get the uplifting that you need. Reach out to one of us. Let us teach you the tools that we've learned along the way to help us come out of those shadowy areas of life, because they are always going to keep coming back around, right? That
Yeah,
just they are. And
sure.
we are here. And speaking of that, how can they find you, Marcus?
Well, I have a website, which is surprise, surprise, www.themarcusweissexperience.com, www.themarcusweissexperience.com. On Instagram, I'm also The Marcus Weiss Experience. On Facebook, I'm Marcus Jacob Weiss, or my business page is The Marcus Weiss Experience. And the reason I use The Marcus Weiss Experience is because it's not just that I'm an experience to behold, but it's because I share what I've experienced, because really that's all I got, and what I have found helps people.
Absolutely.
And
Mhm.
so those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Marcus Weiss. So
Beautiful.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and my website are the best way. And if you get there, then phone number can come next. But thank you,
Beautiful.
Kareen, for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Marcus. And thank you for listening to the Secret Keepers podcast.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit KareenZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.